Well, hello. And this is really interesting because this is the Saturday morning session where we are going to explore um, the dynamic of the lie and how we lie and why we lie and what purpose it serves and how do we get started in the practice of not telling the truth. Well, there's another option. You can always just sort of remain silent on the ground that you do not want to incriminate yourself. But what's really kind of fun is that we're doing this group session, and I think that every one of you may or may not be watching the replay. So that's kind of giving me a chuckle because what it demonstrates to me is the amount of energy and fear and shame and embarrassment we may all be holding in the last stable piece of the structure of this template of misperceptions, assumptions, and lies. So it's probably really good information for all of us. Well, I'm going to move on through and share with you my perspective about this part of the template and how we move from misperceptions to assumptions to lies. And I think a really good question is, why do we tell a lie? And just as there are no versions of the truth, truly, I mean, they're perspectives, but I don't think they're versions of the truth. Um, I, I don't, I don't think that we can consider the lie, although we are conditioned to consider the lie, on a spectrum of the little white lie all the way to the bold faced whopper. And I think answering and asking and answering the question, why do we choose to put ourselves on the spectrum between the little white lie and the bold faced whopper? And I think it has to do with how we perceive ourselves in a dynamic and whether or not we are operating from an egoic perspective or whether we're operating out of pure fear of punishment, sacrifice, and loss impending if we tell the truth. Yes, this is also, it's important to recognize how these templates fit together. And that is one of the ways in which they fit together. So lots of times we find that we are using our throat chakra and our mouths and our biology to lie because we are afraid of punishment, sacrifice, or loss. we're, go- we're going to be punished because we're not pleasing somebody. We may be asked to make a sacrifice that we don't want to make if we tell the truth. And we may also experience loss if and when we do actually tell the truth. So I'm just going to invite you to think back to your own childhood and remember how that dynamic got started for you. Usually it's in family, it's in the school environment, it may be in the religious environment as well, because we will run into barriers around our authenticity most commonly in those areas of activity. So it could be as simple as, did you brush your teeth before you go to bed? You're supposed to do that. And you say you did when you didn't. Now, I know many parents who will absolutely say, come here, let me look at your teeth, right? And they will catch you up in that. Now, in that situation, why would we say we did when we didn't? I think in that situation, it's just a matter of expediency in terms of, how important we recognize something to be for our own well being or not. And most of us don't really recognize the importance of brushing our teeth unless it's really drilled into us. Because you can't imagine getting old and having and losing all your teeth. But your mom and dad know about that, and so do your grandparents and your great grandparents if they're still around. So that's just one simple example. And I found when I look back at this part of me, and I'm always continuing to examine this part of me and feeling the dynamic that happens within me when I have a choice and I can tell a little white lie. That's usually what's going on. And when that's happening, it's because I'm interested in the person that I am in communication with. And I may not want to hurt their feelings. I may not want to bring up a trigger, the template of rejection, abandonment, possibly jealousy for someone over something that really isn't all that important to me, but might be very important to them. Now, perhaps you recognize that that's a dynamic that you've been through yourself. And I think when we get older and we're social and we begin to have our friendships and we're moving out of just operating in our primary families, that one will come up more because we have friends and we don't want to hurt the feelings of our friends. And we don't want to hurt their feelings because we don't want to be caught up in the return boomerang trigger that might flow from them to us in an energy exchange. Because, as with everything, when we communicate, whether we're communicating truthfully or not, there's an exchange of information and energy. So you may have had friendships in which you use the little white lie quite a bit. And then you may have had other friendships in which you were always able to be truthful because you knew that that person you were interacting with um, really was connected to you. And so whatever came forward from you, they appreciated as part of your authenticity. And that's what they were most interested in, not in pleasing themselves or not in protecting your feelings. If you've had a friendship like that, consider yourself incredibly lucky. If you haven't, I would say it's not too late to try to cultivate one that functions in that way, in which your friend has an understanding of who they are and their own ego, that they can relax rather than contract and trigger back. When you come forward with some part of your authenticity that generates a feeling in them that may be other than joyful. This happens in life. We have moments where we're putting something forward and we hope it's going to be received well and we're going to get an authentic collaborative yes response or some kind of response that feels enlivening and fun and exciting and creative. But that's not always going to happen. And so, as we learn to manage and express and experience our own emotions without having to use them to project and make up stories vis a vis the other part of this template, which is misperception, assumptions, then we're able to relax when we put something out and we don't get the response that we would prefer to have. In order to do that, we need to be pretty solid in terms of our own feelings and in terms of being willing to be in a leadership role for a moment and model authenticity for the other person. And I've been fortunate. I've had both kinds of friendships. And the deeper, closest friendships were with the people with whom they could be completely and utterly candid with me in the moment, or I would accept silence and then have them come forward later with their having worked through what their response is and then being fully candid. Those friendships are very precious. And those are the friends with whom I am the closest. And why is this? Because we are willing in our authenticity to risk a little bit of conflict, knowing that we will survive it because we care enough for each other that we can trust the connection, we can trust the relationship, and we're willing to risk um, being exposed to a little bit of conflict and dealing with our own feelings around that conflict, perhaps learning something new about the other person or gaining some insight about ourselves, and relaxing around that interaction rather than tightening up and constricting and then feeling that we need to create separation, right? Because everything that I'm talking to you about in terms of these templates is always going to cycle back around to our choice whether to remain connected and be in relationship or whether we're going to choose to be in separation. So, for those of you that are watching the replay, and I hope that you will, I think this will be very interesting for you to think about vis a vis how you feel about even looking at this issue of the lie. So, one of the things that we kind of have to do to get through clearing this template from ourselves is dealing with our own feelings of embarrassment or shame or guilt or feeling judged if we're caught in a lie. And we need to kind of, what I would recommend you do is an exercise. And you can, if you still are finding you have energy in first, second, third chakras, you can certainly go there. And around this one particular issue, you may find that it would be valuable for you to move through your entire body, moving up your spine and connecting with each of your operating energy centers. And just the first thing to do is to um, be compassionate with yourself, be forgiving, and try to have some insight and understanding between your conscious, unconscious, and subconscious mind states around the dynamic of lying. And look back on specific issues. And I'd say choose, the little white lie, because we can remember some of those, and choose the whopper and take yourself through, revisit those experiences and attempt to reconnect to the feeling states that you were in when you were consciously choosing to lie. Now, sometimes we something blurts out and we didn't even think about it, and that's generally coming from our unconscious. And it's still we're in a some form of self-protective mode, or we're in some form of protective mode, and we can think about important times when people choose to lie. So one of those times might be when you're in an intimate relationship and one partner says, I love you, and the other partner remains silent. Ooh, awkward. Or they feel they don't have the inner strength to stay silent and stay in their authenticity and just really, or to say, I am really, it's wonderful for me to hear that you feel that way about me, but I don't know that I can really respond in the same way and say those words to you. And rather than move on into territory of misperceptions and assumptions, we move into a different territory of authenticity, which is the best place we can ever be in any relationship is in truth, transparency, and trust. That's the foundation for getting our real needs met. So in that situation, both people are then free to get their real needs met. The person who says, I love you, and doesn't hear that back can take that information in and say, oh, as I used to joke about, and I still do in my courses, this is a path with no cheese. So I need to course correct. And I need to look at my misperceptions and assumptions that I've made about myself and about this person. And I need to do that in a calm, reactive, but very feeling way. And then I can course correct so that I can be in an energy dynamic and exchange where when I say, I love you, that's exactly what comes back to me. And I'm receiving that reflection because I probably have cleared up some projections, misperceptions, and assumptions. So that's just one example where this becomes really, really valuable to work with. Another situation, another place when we become adults and we've moved through primary, family, and school and our friendships, we can also deal with these issues at work. So I'm sure in your work life, you can probably remember an incident where you told a little white lie or a bold-faced whopper. I'm sure there have been times when I know I have decided that it was not a day that I could show up at work, and I would call in sick because in our culture, you're not allowed to just not show up for work because you need a process day or you need to rest. It's just not how capitalism works. Um, it would just really, can you imagine the chaos? And actually, I think it would be fun to imagine the chaos because I think it would be a healthier environment for all of us if we could just slow down and be patient. So that's another example where you're being self protective and you don't want to get fired and you don't want to hear the blowback from your boss, but both you and your boss know there's a very good chance that you're not really sick. And so that's become an accepted exchange. It's inauthentic, but it's accepted. That's one fun one to think about. Another one that I think is really important is when it comes to issues of illness or death and dying. And we all have heard of stories of people who have chosen to either lie to themselves or lie to their families when they're terminally ill. And when they do this unconsciously because they can't actually face the realization of their own physical mortality, um, that's denial. And being in self-denial is a form of lying to yourself. Like you can't be in authenticity with yourself, um, because you're too frightened. That's generally how it goes. People are very fearful when it comes to thinking about their own death and how that might unfold. And certainly, if you're a parent and you have young children and you find that you're terminally ill, um, you would have to struggle with what kind of relationship you have with your children and whether or not you choose not to be honest and candid with your children about your condition. And if you're in a partnership, you are then passing over the responsibility for that candor and authenticity to your partner. And maybe the two of you agree that there's going to be either a big bold faced lie or a little white lie to protect the feelings of the children. Because losing a parent to illness or death, when we have some idea that something is coming, it's definitely traumatic, and it can be extremely traumatic for your children if there's not enough time to process that information together consciously. So that's another situation, because sometimes we can be in that circumstance and we misperceive how someone will respond to that news, or we make assumptions as to how someone will respond to that news. And we don't want to risk finding out what the truth is, because we will probably be triggered into feelings that we simply just don't want to feel. And I would suggest that, at whatever phase of life you're in, that you want to really give this one some expansion and some room, because um, when we are facing our own mortality, we're looking, in a good relationship, we're looking at a loss of love. And when we're not so great relationships, we're looking at guilt for feeling relieved. All kinds of things happen. And it's a rather an extension of our ability to be authentic when we are in the stage of life when we're experiencing big love, love that takes you beyond friendship, and love that goes into the co-creative dynamic between adult people. So we have that situation to kind of practice with before we, usually, not always, before we have to encounter conversations with loved ones about death and dying. So there are obviously other really important ways in which we can deal with these dynamics and these triggers. Now, I would say, for the most part, we don't have to get too hung up on the protective little white lie. It's an accepted social condition, and those people who have pure candor don't do well in the world. It's just socially very, very difficult for people who are purely candid all the time. So that gives you some context for having a conversation about what happens when we choose to lie. We don't say silence, or we say, we can't find the words to say work. We all go through it. What you want to do is really line yourself up so that the, the greater clarity you have with perceptions and being free of duality perception, the less projecting that you're going to do, excuse me, and the less misperceiving you're going to be doing. And you're going to be operating in the truth, and this, your throat chakra will be fully functioning here, and the information will be moving in and out in a balanced way, open, dynamic. The same will be true for your visual center and also for your upper centers and your connection to your higher self and all the way on up. Um, Now, sometimes the lie doesn't come in the form of words. Sometimes the miscommunication or the untruthful communication or the withheld communication comes in the form of emotion. And so you should be really aware of that as well. There have been times in my life where um, I literally could not speak because of the depth of emotion that I was experiencing and attempting to balance my awareness with choosing to contain that emotional information inside of me so that I could really gain an understanding of what was going on in my life. And there being no, it was just completely unequivocal. And it was the power of holding in that emotion, not holding it in to not feel it, but holding it in to not project it and create more misperceptions and assumptions and lies. I would say that was a pretty dynamic time in my life, and it was very much the activator for returning to the kind of authenticity that I enjoyed as a child. And this was in the context of an intimate relationship that was important to me, and needing to clear away the misperception that I held anywhere near the same kind of importance to my partner as my partner held to me. And that was very, very, a very, very instructive time in my life when I just started taking off the blinders and really dealing with the veracity of the situation, of my situation, and coming out of the misperception that that person loved me. He didn't love me. I loved him as well as I could at that time of my life, which I have to admit was immense. You know, I had a lot of stuff going on. It was very complicated. But my intention was to love him and be loving and to bring that to the relationship, where that wasn't his intention at all. And waking up to that um, was really, really a powerful interlude in my life. And the course corrections that were required for me to, I would say, evolve into the person that I am today. So, one of the other things that I want to talk about is about misperceptions, assumptions, and the lies that we are in over our heads with when it comes to dynamics between men and women. We've just come out of a major clearing that it would address the hatred of women on the planet, the hatred of women, men hating women, and women hating women. We've come through a major clearing around that. And I think as a part of that energy clearing and triggers and things rising to the surface, we're going to be experiencing an awakening around the lies that we tell ourselves and each other about what the function of a woman is, what the function of a man is. I think we're going to start to unpack a great deal of the anger and sorrow and the missed connections and the unconscious separation that is going on because of the 3D construct templates, where we're not in truth, trust, and transparency with each other as men and women, between the dynamics between the sexes. And this tremendous amount of punishment, sacrifice, and loss that happens because of this. So I just had an interesting thought. I don't know if any of you have seen this film yet, but it's very relevant to this conversation about lies. I would recommend that you watch the film Three Billboards. This past year, it won an Academy Award for the actress Frances McDormand. And in this film, this woman is a truth warrior in the most difficult circumstances. And she just doesn't hold anything back from anybody. And I enjoyed it immensely because I related to her, actually. It was like, if you're going to come into my world and mess with me, you will hear what I perceive to be the truth. And I will have spent some time thinking about it deeply before I open my mouth. But when I open my mouth, bam. And so, what I really enjoyed about this film was it went through many, many layers of going deeper. And I recognized dropping down into another layer and then dropping down into another layer. And I was so grateful when the writers of the film hit the level around misogyny and the hatred of women and how that gets expressed. So I thought that was very, 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 very powerful. And I would recommend you see it with a friend, and then you go have a great conversation afterward. And then you see it with someone who's a good enough friend that you have authenticity and candor between the two of you. So, one of the things that happens with misperceptions, assumptions, and lies is, of course, it's attached to other template structures. And you can see how there's a relationship between this template and punishment, sacrifice, and loss, rejection, abandonment, jealousy, withholding pleasure, inflicting cruelty, freezing time, right? You can see how these things are working together. And so, what I'd like to do now is to take you into an energy field, just a simple exercise, where in your own time, in your own way, wherever it feels comfortable for you to explore quietly, Doesn't mean you have to be still, but it's good to be able to really feel and focus internally as to what your own awareness is showing you. And that's to just, take a series of deep breaths and feel your connection to the planet from here. Anchor down, take a breath, anchor down from your heart center and go deep, deep, deep into the planet. Go well beyond the superficial. Allow yourself to ask the question, what does it feel like when I connect to the core, to the heart of this planet being? And allow yourself to experience that. And then when you feel that connection, and you will have a distinctive moment where you feel some kind of little, I call them pings, a little bit of an acknowledgement that you're connected. That's a place from which you can begin asking lots of questions around your misperceptions about what's going on this planet. The questions that you have about why things are the way they are, about where we are, about what we can be part of evolving and collaborating together to transform. Spend quite a bit of time just connecting from here to the planet. And when you're in that space and you spend some time, you can also um, express to this connection that you really are only interested in living in the truth. And so any additional information that can come from the planet to help you live authentically in the truth, outside of the 3D construct, outside, free from any of these templates, that you're expressing an intention and a commitment to live that way. So that's part one of the exercise. And then once you feel that connection, you want to let the energy flow up through your body, all the way up, top of your head, up through your star point, your point of individuation, and then to flow down and around you like a fountain, flowing down and around you, coming and underneath your feet, and going back into the connection to the planet. Ask your questions and listen. Ask your questions and feel your body, because your body is designed to let you know when you are in candor and truthful, authentic circumstances. And you want to know the signals that your body will send you when you're not. You can continue the exercise and then move up to your throat center here, your center of communication. And this is all kinds of communication. It's not just language, it's math, it's music, it's creativity. And you can let this open and engage in the same kind of connection. And you can bring the energy up so that you can feel that you have an opportunity to be able to express yourself physically and emotionally with candor and in authenticity, without generating punishment, sacrifice, or loss, without generating rejection, abandonment, and jealousy, without generating and activating any of the other templates that we're working with. That's well worth spending some time with. And ask yourself, how am I withholding vital information that I require to have to live in truth? And please help me be able to sort out my misperceptions and the assumptions that lead to me lying to myself about who I am, what I'm doing in my life, why I'm doing it, and what information I really need to know from all of my relationships in candor, authenticity, truth, trust, and transparency. And be prepared to ask for this, that this be revealed to you in a gentle way. And then you're going to breathe again and you're going to come up to your third eye and you're going to invite the energy flow to show you the way forward through clearing up the misperceptions, the assumptions, clearing up what would cause you to go out of balance so you would feel you're not able to live in truth in your own life. And then ignite this. This is your sacred imagination here. This is your sacred imagination center. It's also the back aspect is your executive function. And so you're going to ask this information center to supply you with all the organizational information around living in truth and harmony and coherence and clarity that you need to have to be able to sort yourself out and stay on your path, your bliss path. So you're bringing heart, throat, sacred imagination. And when we engage this repeatedly and we're really creating, the sustainable engine of this, it's a wonderful source of energy that we don't have to generate from ourselves. We allow this energy to come in and move through us. And when we go to the next step and we bring that organization of information up into our crown chakra where we connect to our higher selves and that's the interface with our meta being, and once that begins to clear from your unconscious, subconscious, and conscious mind barriers to being sovereign soul embodied human being, then you invite information from the morphogenic field from all the other people who are able to be connected at that level, and even information from people who are, I mean, we're all connected to that, but they're unconscious about it. And you invite that information into your own organization of information to assist you in being in a reality that's out of the construct, it's out of the template domains of any of the ones that we're going to be talking about. Now, this is a beautiful practice, and it doesn't take long to do it. And it's kind of fun. It's almost like a game after a while, and you begin to see how things are moving about, and you begin to notice when your body is just like, yeah, shift. You're moving into perception, you're moving into assumption, you're going to be having to interact with some lying in a minute. Shift. Do a reality shift. Get yourself out of that state of consciousness. And when this becomes a really committed practice, it sets things up for you to move with fewer constraints in your daily life. It sets things up for incredible harmony in your close personal relationships, which include being able to be emotionally authentic and to speak what it is that you need to say, or to be able to say to someone that you're close to, I don't feel ready to talk about that right now. I need some time to process that. Can we talk about this another time? You know, that's the only maybe that you should ever be willing to accept. Because I will share with you that once you're living in an authentic life, living in truth, and keeping that commitment to yourself and to life and to the world and to the planet, anything that is not a yes is a no. And the only exception to that is when someone says to you, or life says to you, we're not quite there yet. Be patient. Give us some time to really work things out, and you will get a clear yes or a clear no. Now, when we're consciously co creating, we're always asking for that because we know that's a really beautiful way to move through life. So, we're finished with this particular template, misperceptions, assumptions, and lies. The next template set will be entitlement, insecurity, and indebtedness. Because when we are still being triggered and moving around the template dynamic of misperceptions, assumptions, and lies, and it's not cleared, we will find ourselves living in reality circumstances that trigger us around issues of entitlement of all kinds, privilege of all kinds, and the polarity of that is um, indebtedness, because indebtedness is the balancing energy for entitlement. And then the point that these two dynamics spin around on in terms of the template is chronic insecurity, because those who are entitled are afraid of losing their entitlement, and those who are indebted are afraid of never being able to come out of indebtedness. So it creates insecurity and anxiety on both sides of the dynamic. And really wobbles truth, transparency, and trust in all of our relationships. So I think that's probably enough to finish off this template set. And um, I think it's really interesting that there's a tremendous, almost deafening silence on the other end of this group session today, because it's a group session of one. And I do encourage those of you who are viewing this to, I'm telling you this because I would like you to appreciate how difficult it is for people to talk about the reality of lies and lying. And we're living in a system of separation that is absolutely constructed out of lies. And when we wake up to this, and then we kind of have to sort through, the shock factor, and then we have to test and validate it, work ourselves out of the construct and out of the states of separation that are generated by a complete reality set that's more or less structured on lies. And finding the resonance of truth is a very difficult thing to do until you habituate yourself to that vibration and frequency, and you intend that's your wheelhouse, that's where you're going to live your life. So thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of the 3D construct template workshop. And if you're watching this and you'd like to book a private session with me to talk more about where you are in this dynamic, and you want to do that one-on-one instead of in a group, absolutely reach out to me. at livinglessonslibrary@gmail.com, and we can set up some private time. Okay, so go forward and enjoy yourself and really connect and develop your relationship with your bliss channel. And be courageous and be brave and gently, gently and with compassion and forgiveness and as much love as you can muster, set aside things in your life that are misperceptions based on assumptions and lies. Okay, thank you. Peace and blessings. This is Annie Salas. Bye.